Chapter 6. That was a long summer, the summer of 1951. I was waiting for the Scholastic record book to come out. In the spring, I had won the mile in 4 minutes, 28 seconds at the Missouri State Meet for Negroes, one of the best high school times of the year, and I could hardly wait to see my name in the book when it came out in the fall. It was a long summer and a hot one. The papers always had pictures of people frying eggs on the sidewalk in front of their houses. The mud on the river banks banked into a powdery dust that blew all over the city. All through June and July, Boo and Presley and I went downtown looking for jobs. Every day. Never got anything. "Sorry, boys, we're not hiring color today." By August, Boo and Presley gave up. But I couldn't go back to shining shoes and running to the store for the neighbors. My name would be in the book soon. I kept going downtown alone. It hit 109 degrees one day that August, so hot that skin peeled off my hand when I held a brass door handle too long. I had a nickel in my pocket that day, no job, and I started to walk home. 45 blocks, and every time I took a breath, the heat got caught in my throat. I thought I was going to pass out. And then I saw a beautiful sign on the restaurant window. Air conditioned. Soda water, 5 cents. It was cool inside, and the soda jerk looked like an angel in his clean white uniform. "We don't serve niggas here." I just stood there, trying to get my mouth wet enough to tell him what I'd gone through that day. "What's the matter, you deaf boy?" To tell him how good it felt in here. To tell him I was sorry I was a Negro. Someone in the corner smashed a pop bottle against the marble counter and came toward me. He came around in front of me, waving the broken bottle in his hand like Humphrey Bogart would do in the movies. There were others in back of him grinning. He shoved the broken bottle at me, and I put my hand in front of my face. I didn't feel anything, but they started yelling. The soda jerk came flying over the counter like Alan Ladd, and he and Humphrey Bogart threw me out. I started walking again, choking on the heat and the dust, watching my blood run down the sidewalk and the insides come out of my hand. It was white. Then I fainted. A wonderful feeling, like falling away from the world. When I woke up, a white lady was kneeling in the gutter next to me, her arm under my head. Her other hand was stroking the lump on my forehead where it hit the pavement. "Everything will be all right. You're going to be all right, young man." There was a white policeman standing next to her, and I tried to tell him that I wasn't bothering the lady, that I hadn't touched her. But my mouth was still too dry. "Leave him alone, lady. I'll take care of this. The ambulance will be right here." "Where are you taking him, officer?" "The nigger hospital." "I beg your pardon?" "Homer G. Phillips." "That's too far. We'll take him to Barnes." "Barnes ain't for niggers, lady. You better mind your business." "Officer, do you know who I am?" "Some nigger lover who—" The lady said her name, and the cop's mouth dropped open, and he took a step backwards. "I'll have your badge number, and you can consider yourself fired." The cop began to apologize and help me into the ambulance. The lady got into the back with me. "Barnes Hospital, and quickly. Please, this young man is seriously injured." They turned on the siren. For me. Cars got out of the way. When she took me into the lobby of Barnes Hospital, I was a little ashamed of all the blood and dirt on my clothes. I had heard of Barnes, but never expected to be inside. They treated me well. Right upstairs, no waiting, one doctor to clean my hand, another to sew 8 stitches and put on a clean white bandage. They all seemed to know the lady, and she stayed with me all the time. Afterwards, she took me downstairs and called a cab. The driver looked at us strangely, but the lady got right in. She asked me where I lived, and she told the driver. She kept talking to me the whole ride, but I didn't hear a word. I just kept staring at the beautiful white bandage on my hand. Nobody in my neighborhood had ever had such a beautiful white bandage. I think I better get off here, ma'am.
But this isn't North Taylor.
I know, ma'am, but my mama would think I did something wrong if she saw me come home with the white lady. That was true, but I couldn't tell her I wanted to slip in the back door and surprise everyone with my bandage.
Are you sure you're all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you really sure?
Yes, ma'am, and thank you very much. Thank you too, sir, I told the cab driver. When I got out, the lady waved to me through the back window. I started to run. I felt so good, I ran 5 blocks, then 10 blocks past my house. Finally, hot, my hand throbbing, I went home. I slipped in the back door. Hey, everybody, come in here. You want to see something? You really want to see something? Mama put me to bed, and I stayed there for 3 days. I only got up to put white shoe polish on my bandage when it started to get dirty. Everyone came to see me, and I told them about the white lady and the ambulance and going into Barnes Hospital. I didn't know the lady's name, and I think some people didn't believe my story. After a week or so, Mama told me to go to the city hospital to have the stitches removed. I didn't want to go there, but nobody at Barnes had said anything about my coming back. So I took the stitches out myself, one by one, with a needle and scissors. It wasn't that hard. That September, the Scholastic record book came out, and my name wasn't in it. I went down to the Board of Education, and a man told me that records set in all Negro track meets were never listed. Coach St. James told me the same thing. You have to run with the white boys to get your name in the book. The next time I went down to the Board of Education, I took a couple of thousand friends with me, and I got my name on television and in the St. Louis Dispatch. What really happened was that the Summer High PTA organized a march on the board that September to protest overcrowded conditions. There were a lot of tensions and fears. Pop Beckett stood in front of the school with a baseball bat in his hand, and when he saw me, he told me not to get involved. Got to go, Pop. My mama doesn't know I was one of the best milers in the country this year. He just looked at me amazed. My job on the march was to run up and down the line, keeping the kids in order and warning them not to steal from fruit stands along the way. The line got longer and longer as kids from other Negro high schools joined. I never did get a chance to talk to the mayor about my time for the mile. The newspaper and television reporters along the way thought I was kidding when I said I was protesting because my name wasn't in the Scholastic record book. So I told them how there were 80 kids in the English class, and we learned math in the machine shop because there weren't enough rooms in the school, and the last 10 kids to get to history had to stand up for an hour because there weren't enough seats. They wrote in the papers that I was the leader of the demonstration. It's not as if I really told them that. The police broke up the demonstration at Locust Street, in front of the board building. They said it was a breach of the peace, and a man came out and told us that if we wanted better schools, we should return to them. And another white man said that 6 adults from the PTA could come into the building and discuss the matter if the rest of us went back to classes. We did. The city was pretty well turned upside down by all this Negro marching and chanting and sign waving. It wasn't even a matter of wanting to sit down. Back at school, everyone told me I was going to get expelled, and back home, Mama was all upset. The white folks had told her that the march was communist-inspired. I told her I didn't even know how to spell communist. Nothing much happened right away, but the next week, the high school cross-country program was integrated. I don't know if it had anything to do with the march. It was the first time Negro and white ever competed against each other in the high schools of St. Louis, and things really began to open up for me. It was wild. There were rumors and excitement and electricity in the air. We didn't know the white boys, and they didn't know us. We never had a chance to love or hate each other on a man-to-man basis, to watch each other run, to see each other naked. There were Negro rumors that the white boys had special conditioning and food that gave them the strength to beat us in the long distances. There were white rumors that we needed only 3 runners at a track meet. One would win the 100 and the 220, the second would win both hurdles, and the third would win the half and the mile. Then the 3 regulars would borrow a Negro water boy and win the relays. My first integrated meet was a cross-country run over at Wood River. I was so nervous I was shaking when we came to the line. Coach St. James had given us a big build-up for weeks. He had made us learn strategy all over again. Made us promise to lay off the grandstanding. No argyle socks, no saluting, no crossing the tape holding your buddy's hand, no waving at your girlfriends. This was big time. If we won, we get our names in the white newspapers the next day. We wouldn't have to wait until the Argus, the weekly Negro newspaper, came out on Thursday. And the coach had told me that there was a little white boy in the race who had one of the best scholastic 3-mile times in the country. And if I could beat him, I could win the race. But we had never run the course before, and we didn't even know which was the white boy to beat. Bang! I didn't break out too fast. Let the pack go on ahead. This is a long race. You could see right away how different it was, running against boys who had eaten better and taken better care of their bodies all their lives. They looked smooth. They ran smooth. I moved up into the pack and then went on ahead. I didn't know any of these white boys, which were the early pace setters, which were the ones saving themselves for a final sprint. So I decided to stay with the leaders. There was a little white boy way ahead of everyone else, running as easy as flowing water. He took the corners sharply and never seemed to get scratched by the bushes along the course. I got scratched all the time. I decided he had to be the white boy to beat. I moved up, past the leaders, and started to dog that white boy. He was running too fast for me, and when I tried to match his pace, my breath got short, and it felt like somebody was sewing up the left side of my stomach, and there was broken glass inside my shoes. He kept running easy. I knew I could never outrun him. Have to trick this race, Greg. About the 2-mile mark, I came up alongside him and slapped him on the butt. Nice going, baby, I said, and I fell back fast so he wouldn't hear me panting. A little bit later, I came up again and kicked him on the heel of his shoe. Not enough to break his stride or bother him or get myself disqualified. Just enough so I could say, "Excuse me, baby." Again, I dropped back fast so he wouldn't hear my breath come out. That upset him, but he didn't break. Not much time left now. Last chance. I came right up behind him, and I held my breath. He felt me running right behind him, and he heard my feet, but he never heard me breathe. There was a fire in my chest, and my mind got fuzzy, and when I tried to take a shallow breath, my brain kept clicking to shut it off. But he was looking around him now, and his eyes were wide, and he was so scared he speeded up. I held my breath as long as I could. Then I dropped back to where he couldn't hear me, and I let it all out and got myself together again. He had speeded up too early, and when he tried to slow down and settle back into his pace, his smooth stride was broken, and he was off. He was destroyed. He wasn't running his race anymore. He was scared, and his mind was all messed up. I came up again, and I knew I could pass him any time I wanted to now. But I didn't know the course, and I didn't want to take the chance of making a wrong turn and getting disqualified. So I stayed a few yards behind him until the last 200 yards, a straight shot to the tape. I could see the officials and the band and the crowd and the photographers, and I passed him going away and watched my knees all the way down the stretch, higher and higher, right through the tape. And then I got to see how Whitey treats his heroes. First class all the way. Had my picture on the front page of the Wood River paper and on the sports pages of all the white St. Louis papers. Dick Gregory, #1. That was the start of a hell of a year. That last year in high school, I won the state cross-country meet at Forest Park, white and Negro. State champion. And then I finished second in a 15-mile race, the only high school runner in a field of college boys. People started listening to me that year, taking me to dinners, giving me awards. Outstanding citizen. They always introduced me as Dick Gregory, a boy who was born and raised on relief. Look at him now, they said, as if relief was all in the past, as if Mama wasn't still dragging home from the white folks, as if I wasn't taking $5 at a time out of her pocketbook. I was too busy being a good example to go out and work, to be much of a son or a brother. I took the high school cooking course that year because I wanted to learn etiquette. I was getting to be a big man around, and I wanted to learn how to hold a knife and fork. I always used to eat one course at a time, clean off the meat, then turn the plate and clean off the potatoes, turn it again and clean off the greens. I had to convince them at Sumner that I was going to be a cook after graduation, so they would let me take the home economics course. That meant I had to take sewing too. But I learned how to eat right. I never told them the real reason I took the course, so they put cook after my name in the yearbook. Didn't matter. I was captain of the track team that year and the cross-country team, and I played the kettle drum in the orchestra and the bass drum in the band, and the bongos for a dance club called the Rockettes. Even started taking girls to the movies. I was so cool, I always took them up to the balcony, the sophisticated place in those Negro movie houses in St. Louis. If the picture wasn't so good, you could always smoke and hug your girl and make jokes. The trick there was to go to the movie house before you picked up your girl and slip the usher some money to save you a couple of balcony seats. Then you come back with your girl and wink at the usher and say, "Hi, baby," and he'd take you right upstairs. Sometimes the usher would be out to lunch and all the balcony seats would be filled. That was the worst feeling in the world, but usually you get up there, and when the movie was over, you strut down from the balcony real slow so everyone could see how cool you were, how important. You knew everybody. You had connections. You never let anyone know you tipped the usher. In those days, all I really wanted out of life was to be able to sit in the balcony. That year, I was in the balcony all right, winning races, playing drums, going out. Everything went my way. Once there was a night track meet, and the lights went out in the middle of the race. I sneaked off across the field, taking a shortcut, and fell over a hurdle. I was lying there when the lights went on again. The officials tried to disqualify me. Not a chance. I told them that any fool knows that when the power fails during a night athletic event, the race in progress is automatically canceled and then rerun. They looked at each other and coughed, and I guess they didn't know their own rules too well. I had just made that up on the spur of the moment. The race was rerun. And then one day I decided I wanted to be president of my senior class. Only certain people had ever been class president. Kids from high-class families who had perfect attendance records, were in the National Honor Society, belonged to the French Club and the Math Club and the service organizations. So, I got my own organization, the Hoodlums. I went around and talked to all those cats who used to stand outside the proms, all those guys who didn't have anything going for them, and I told them I wanted this thing, that I was their representative. They went and they got it from me. They spread the word that if anybody else won the election, he might as well quit. I was class president. That was another turning point for me, a new feeling of responsibility for others. In track, I was running just for myself, but as president of the graduating class at the Sumner High School, I knew my shirt had to be clean, my shoes had to be polished. I couldn't cut class or come late or sit in the toilet and watch crap games or yell out crazy things in class. There were obligations, meetings to go to, a senior day speech to write. I had to talk to the white man who came through selling senior class rings for $20 each. I had to work out how he would take his orders and collect his money and then give out the rings. I wasn't able to afford one myself. I had never really thought about college until that last semester in high school when scholarship offers began coming in from colleges around the country. Mama had only finished 3rd grade, and so just finishing high school was a big dream in our family. College was for people with money. After high school, you get yourself some kind of job. There were more than 100 offers, colleges from California to Massachusetts. But my grades were too low for most of the schools. I was probably the only class president in the country that year who was in the lowest fifth of more than 700 students. I tried to study that year, to read books, but I just didn't know how. At 8 o'clock after track practice, I'd sit down in the kitchen and try to read. God, I'm going to sit here until midnight if I have to. I'm going to read this book, even if it takes an hour to read every page. I'm going to sit here and read, one word at a time. And then the words started getting fuzzy, and my mind started drifting, floating off to a million places. Didn't matter. It was still my year. Coach St. James had gone to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, and he said he could help me get in. He thought it would be the best school for me, a chance to be a big fish in a little pond. Southern Illinois wanted to give me an entrance exam, but I didn't even show up for it. I was so sure I would flunk. I talked to the coach down there and told him that if he wanted me to run track for him, I wouldn't take any tests. He sent me to the dean, who made a deal. I could go to college on an athletic work scholarship without taking the entrance exam. But the first quarter I made bad grades, I'd have to take the exam and pass it, or leave the school. Iron Man Gregory won again. Didn't have to study, didn't even have to train for my track meets anymore. Wrapped my legs in tape and told the coach I hurt too much to practice. I stayed out late, went to dances, took girls up to the balcony, drank beer, even bought a pack of cigarettes. I started letting the vice president of the class go to the student government meetings. When the teachers kept asking me if my senior class day speech was ready yet, I told them I was working on it. Tomorrow. It'll be ready tomorrow. I guess I thought I'd just go up there and tell jokes. I really thought I was great stuff. Bigger than the Gregory family. Bigger than the school. Right up there with God. I remember the day we walked out to Forest Park for the final meet of my high school career. And all along the way, there were papers on the newsstands with headlines that read, Dick Gregory closes out one of the most brilliant careers in history of St. Louis high school track. One headline even read, Dick Gregory wins state meet 2nd year in a row. Somebody must have lost his job on that one, because it rained when we got out to Forest Park, and the meet was postponed. All that week, there were stories in the newspapers about how Dick Gregory was going to close out his high school career in style, in a blaze of glory. I believed every word, didn't bother to train, stayed up late, made all the senior parties, Then we went out to Forest Park again, and the sun was out, and the press was there, and the bands and the photographers and crowds were waiting for me to close out this brilliant high school career. It was a hell of a closeout, all right. I finished 17th. I couldn't believe it. Neither could anyone else. After the race, I just hung around the finish line, waiting for them to disqualify the 16 runners who finished ahead of me. The coach was mad, and the press was disgusted, and I was ashamed. The headlines didn't even mention who won the race, just Dick Gregory finishes disappointing 17th. I went back to school and they started asking me about my speech again, and I just shrugged and walked away. I had gotten so big in my own mind that when I disappointed myself, there was nothing left to fall back on. Too big for Mama, too big for the teachers, too big for God. But I was wrong again. The day before the senior ceremony, one of the English teachers handed me a speech. I walked up on the stage that day, and it seemed as though the whole world was holding its breath. When the principal pinned the school colors on me, his hand was shaking so much he stuck the pin right into my chest. I stepped behind the microphone. Suddenly, I had that feeling again. The hot water flowing upward, the monster growing to crush the world, and that teacher's speech felt like it was mine. You know, since the beginning of time, man has used symbols. Suddenly the whole goddamn auditorium stood shifting and whispering. Everyone froze, spellbound. The crude stone tablets, unearthed by archaeologists, symbolized the feeble attempt of man to record his thoughts and his history. The teachers lost their terrified expressions. The students' mouths dropped open. The cross, so familiar in Christian civilization, the bald eagle, to many a symbol of democratic ideals. They were leaning toward me now, everybody, as if they wanted to run up and hug me. A symbol of man's efforts to live harmoniously with his fellow man. Today we have gathered for a great symbolic experience. Colors Day, the maroon and white of Sumner High School, a symbol that for years has caused a little fire to burn in the hearts of many. Now we have joined this multitude. Needless to say, we will wear the maroon and white, the symbol of the years we have spent in learning and thought and growth, with justifiable pride in the years to come. I was done, and you could hear the breath rush out of hundreds of lungs. And then they started cheering and shouting, and the hoodlums nearly tore the auditorium down, and the teachers were smiling and shaking each other's hands, and I looked down at Mama, and all I could see was tears in her eyes, and she was moving her lips, and I knew just what she looked like when she was alone, and saying, "Thank God, oh thank God." Chapter 7. I was walking down the main street of Carbondale, Illinois in 1953, and the white man touched my arm. "Dick Gregory?" "Yeah, that's right." "You don't know me, but my son and I have always come to watch you run. He's sitting in the car over there. He can't walk without crutches. I'd be much obliged if you say hello to him and give him an autograph. It would mean a lot to him." "Be glad to." We walked over to the car and opened the front door. He was a skinny little boy, maybe 9 years old. "John, this is Dick Gregory. He wants to say hello to you." I leaned in and shook his little hand. His legs were in heavy metal braces. "Real glad to meet you, John. Your daddy tells me you're a big fan. You always come out to cheer for Southern. You know we always run a lot faster when there's folks behind us." The little boy smiled very shyly and pulled out a 10-cent store album. "Would you sign my autograph book?" Sure, John got a pencil? John didn't have a pencil, neither did his father. It was a Sunday, and the only place we could get a pencil was the restaurant we were standing in front of. I turned to the father. They'll give you a pencil in there. He looked at me a little strangely, but he went in and got a pencil. He handed it to me as if he thought I should have walked into the restaurant and gotten a pencil myself. I signed the autograph book, told John I'd be looking for him in the stands next week, and walked away, quickly. I could feel the father's eyes on my back, could hear him thinking about some uppity nigger making him go fetch a pencil. Somehow I didn't feel I could explain to him that Negroes weren't allowed in that restaurant. That before I could have asked for a pencil, I would have heard that woman behind the cash register say, "I'm sorry, but you know we're not allowed to serve colored in here." I don't know if that father and his little crippled son would have believed me. What the hell? Dick Gregory owned Carbondale. Captain of the cross-country team, captain of the track team, financial grant, busboy in the president's house, fastest half-miler in the school's history, drummer in the orchestra and the marching band, big actor in the variety show, outstanding athlete of 1953. The only things Dick Gregory couldn't do in Carbondale were eat out with his teammates and sit in the orchestra section of the movie house. I should have gotten that little crippled kid autograph. He was an American. Sometimes it seemed as though all the manhood I won for myself out on the track was taken away when I got into town. You run and you tear your body apart, and you win, and the crowd goes wild shouting your name, and your teammates carry you off the field on their shoulders, and Doc Lingle, the coach, throws his arms around you. And when the team goes off downtown for a steak and a beer, you have to tell them you can't make it. You have something better to do. I didn't finish a single book while I was in college, but I learned a lot, and I got myself an attitude. In the beginning, I could fool myself. When I left for Southern Illinois in March of 1952 for the spring quarter with a metal suitcase and a shopping bag full of Mama's bologna sandwiches and a fried chicken, it was a thrill just to be going out of town. I had slipped out on the neighborhood. Just Mama and me, and some of the kids went down to the Greyhound bus terminal in St. Louis. And it was a bigger thrill when I got to Carbondale, left the shopping bag under my seat on the bus, and walked on the campus. I was in college. I was really in college. It was going to be beautiful. I made the team right away as a freshman, and I made a lot of friends. There were mostly white kids at school and white instructors, and not too many of them had heard of me. I had never seen so many white folks in one place before, except in parades and during election campaigns when they have colored day picnics and let the black babies pee all over them for the vote. But I wasn't too nervous because I had talked to white boys during track meets in high school, and I had my equalizer. I could always go out on the track and crush the world. I developed as a runner. Leland P. Lingle was a fine coach and a fine man. He was the first white man to stretch out his hand to me. It was Doc Lingle who told me to take courses in speech and drama and music. It was Doc Lingle who laughed at my jokes and said I'd be a first-rate entertainer someday. He was a kind man. He used to buy me a $1.25 steak dinner at the university cafeteria every time I broke a school record, and he never complained when I purposely lowered the record a tenth of a second at a time just to get more steaks. I eventually brought the half-mile record down to 1 minute, 54.1 seconds. but I was still very confused. Track became something different for me in college. In high school, I was fighting being broke and on relief, and each Saturday I'd go out and recharge my batteries, be a hero for another week. But in college, I was fighting being a Negro. That's not a temporary condition. It was a hell of a thing for me to be running good track in college and walk past a downtown restaurant and see a teammate in there eating a sandwich and drinking a malt with his girl. He'd look up and smile and wave at me through the plate glass window. I'd wave back, and I'd say to myself, "Eat up good, 'cause tomorrow I'm going to crush you on the track." But by the time tomorrow rolled around, I'd have swallowed the hurt down, and I'd go out and show that guy how to shift his weight when he took the turn. There were the weekends the team went traveling, and we'd all be sitting in some roadside diner, and the only reason I was in there was because I was one of Doc Lingle's boys. Local white folks would walk in and look at me and nudge each other. I never talked about it with my white friends because it's not something you can tell them about. All you can do is sit in the team bus with your metal suitcase across your knees and bang on it like it was a drum and sing calypso songs and tell jokes. Happy-go-lucky Greg, personality kid, funny man, always laughing. Sure, Mama always said there was more hope in laughing. There were quite a few Negroes at Southern, and we stuck together, roomed together, and dated and partied and hung around together. We'd walk downtown in twos and threes, and as we passed those restaurants, the white kids would come out and say, "Where you going, Greg?" And I'd wink and say, "Got a little party to go on, Big Daddy." We hardly ever took our white friends down to the Negro neighborhood. They must have thought segregation worked both ways. That wasn't true. There were 2 honky-tonk bars down in the Negro section, and we were a little too ashamed of them to bring our white friends down. There were a lot of things I didn't tell the white boys because I couldn't take the chance that they wouldn't understand. About Mama and how she was in and out of the hospital these days, the diabetes and the heart trouble getting worse. A bad-smelling discharge coming out of her that Dolores thought was cancer. How could I explain how I felt about my mama, and that as much as I loved her, I didn't want to go back home? How could I explain that I was dying a slow death too, in college, trying to figure out why I was running and going to business administration classes and working as a busboy in the president's dining room and planning my steps so I'd always be near the university cafeteria or university drug when I got hungry? How could I explain how I felt the day a white history instructor wrote the word Negro on the blackboard and spelled it with a small N? At the end of the hour, I went to the board and erased the letter and wrote in a capital N. Everybody stared and nobody said anything about it. I don't know how long it all would have gone on or what I would have done if it hadn't been for what happened in the movies. I always liked the movie house in Carbondale. I thought it was the coolest place in the world. In St. Louis, it was always a big deal to get into the balcony, but in Carbondale, we had it made. As soon as I got there, I found out that all the Negro athletes sat up in the balcony. A bunch of us would go to the movies together, and we'd march right up to the balcony and laugh and make jokes about the picture. I always figured that one of the juniors or seniors had taken care of the usher. I remember the first time I went to the movies alone. I bought a ticket with my last penny, and I just sort of stood around downstairs looking for someone to borrow a quarter from so I could tip the usher. I was a little embarrassed when the usher, a white student I had seen around campus, came up to me. I had nothing for him. You're Dick Gregory, aren't you? That's right. He smiled at me. We always hear a lot about you. Nice to have you here. You can go right on upstairs. There are plenty of seats. Did I feel big? Didn't even have to tip the usher to get up to the balcony anymore. I knew someone. I had connections. Thanks, baby. I'll take care of you next time, I told the usher. The next time I took a girl. I had promised to take another girl to the movies that night, but at the last minute, I got another date. I was so afraid of running into that first girl up in the balcony that I took my date and sat downstairs. She jerked away from me and started toward the stairs, but I grabbed her hand. Come on, baby, you with me tonight. She must have thought I meant that Dick Gregory was such a big man he could go anywhere he wanted. She seemed to be trembling when we sat downstairs, but I was so busy worrying about meeting that other girl that I didn't notice right away. Then I thought she was chilly, and I thought all the people downstairs turning and staring and pointing at us were whispering about that great track star, Dick Gregory. Then the usher came over. There are plenty of seats in the balcony, Greg. That's okay, baby. I'll sit here tonight. Greg, I'm sorry, but you'll have to go upstairs. I figured that he wanted a tip from last time after all, so I started to lean over and explain why I couldn't take a chance on being seen up in the balcony tonight. His voice got hard. I said, you have to go upstairs. I still thought he was playing until he came back with the manager. May I see you for a moment, Mr. Gregory? When white folks call you Mister, you know something is wrong. I told the girl I'd be right back, never knowing I was leaving her down there with all that hell, the white folks downstairs turning and hissing and grumbling, and the Negroes upstairs cheering, yelling, Go, baby! Go, you give it to him, Greg. Until I got into the manager's office, I thought the balcony was cheering me for last week's race. I'm sorry, Mr. Gregory, but you know you can't sit in the orchestra. Why not? Because colored seating is in the balcony. My St. Louis dream died that night. My dream about always being able to afford the balcony. In Carbondale, the balcony was my place. I stood there so confused, wondering if the usher back home in St. Louis had been cheating me all those years, or if this man was trying to destroy something I had. If you want me in the balcony, you have to put me there. Do you want me to call the police? Go ahead. He called the police. I almost laughed. How many times had I given an usher a tip to save me a balcony seat? And when I got there, the usher was gone and the balcony was full. And I wanted to call the police. Now here's a man calling a cop to get me up to the balcony. I went back and got my date and left. She was crying. On the way out, the manager said, Be sure and get your money back. Keep it, I'll be back. I went back alone the next night and sat downstairs. They gave me the okay. Let him sit downstairs, he's crazy. Anybody who bucks this system is crazy, and we don't punish insane people here in America. And the nights after that, I started bringing Negro friends. Guys who weren't Dick Gregory, big athlete. Guys who couldn't be crazy. If I thought about it, I should have brought Doc Lingo, or the dean, or the president of the university. And then Hollywood produced that great movie about Jesus Christ called The Robe. The movie house in Carbondale had paid a lot of money for that movie, and one night while I was sitting downstairs, the manager invited me to his office. He was scared to death. He told me how much money he had spent for the picture, how afraid he was of going bankrupt, how he couldn't afford to lose white customers at a time like this. If I promised not to sit downstairs while the robe was showing, everything would be all right afterwards. Negroes could sit anywhere they wanted to. I was sick and tired of negotiating for my rights. I agreed. I was sitting in that movie house in the balcony on the night that Mama died. It was a good thing I was in the balcony that night, because Doc Lingle would never have thought to look for me downstairs. He called me out into the aisle and took me to telephone home. "Is it Mama, Doc?" "Just call home, Dick." "Is she dead?" "Just call home." "Doc, I'm very sorry, Dick." When I finally got through on the phone, Dolores said, "Hurry home, Richard. Mama is dead." "No need to rush now, Loris." I went back to my room and started to pack, and my roommate said, "Think nice thoughts about her, Greg. How much good she did and how much pain she was in. Make you feel better." I cried and I prayed that night, thinking of Mama and blaming myself. If I hadn't gone to college, if I had stayed home and gotten a job, Mama wouldn't have to keep on working in white folks' houses, riding the streetcar with basket lunches to sell to the colored porters in the downtown hotels, hiding the telephone when the relief worker came around. My mama was 48 years old when she died. I took the bus home the next morning. I couldn't believe I was sitting in the house on North Taylor again, and Mama wasn't coming home. I jumped up every time the streetcar stopped, and suddenly I realized why I always stayed out and played until night. When Mama wasn't there, it wasn't a home. It was nothing but a house. I didn't have too much to say to my brothers and sisters. After we talked about Mama, we just sat around, not looking at each other. I wandered around the neighborhood just to hear Mrs. Simmons and Mrs. Rector and Mr. Ben talk about what a great woman she was. I thought maybe Big Press would show up. She would have come back from the dead for that. Mama lay at the undertaker's with a smile on her face, wearing all those fine, rich white folks' clothes. She finally had a place to wear them. I bent over and kissed her and said, "Thanks, Mama. Someday I'm going to do something to make you proud of me." And I walked out, and a voice in my head said, "You'll be all right, Richard. Just be careful. Wrap up good, and don't wear tight belts against the poor stomach of yours." Everybody wondered why I didn't cry. It hurt too much to cry. At the funeral the next day, I stood away from everybody else while those dirty little men in muddy overalls leaned on their rusty shovels and smoked while the preacher read. I wanted to run up to them and pull their shovels away and tell them not to throw dirt in my mama's face. But all her white folks had come to the cemetery, and I knew Mama didn't want me to mess up in front of all her good white folks. So they threw the dirt in her face, and I turned and walked back to the house and packed. I knew it would be the last time I'd ever be in that house, because it wasn't my home anymore. I went out to the backyard and looked up at the sky and said, "I'm sorry, Mama. Sorry I was embarrassed because we were on relief. Sorry I was ashamed of you because you weren't dressed the way other kids' mothers were dressed. Sorry you had to die before I realized what a great lady you were." Chapter 8. I went back to school numb, and I stayed that way for most of the next 4 years. Through the rest of that year at school, through 2 years in the Army, through the last year at college. It wasn't a sleepy numbness, it was a cold, hard, bitter numbness. It got me the Outstanding Athlete Award of 1953. I remember the day I walked past the athletic department office a few weeks after Mama died, and for the first time I really noticed the pictures along the walls. There were rows and rows of Negro athletes' pictures, but along the top of the wall, where the pictures of each year's outstanding athlete hung, there were only white faces. A school 84 years old, and not one Negro had ever won the award. It was time. So I walked up to the coach and told him that if I wasn't elected Outstanding Athlete for 1953, I was going to quit. I threatened them so cool that they couldn't even give it to another Negro. I went to them as an individual, made them think it had to do with me, not race. I made it. Outstanding Athlete of the Year. And all I could do was run track. Never picked up a basketball. Couldn't play baseball. Didn't know how to swim. The next year another Negro, Leo Wilson, made it. And we've been making it ever since. But someone had to break the ice with a threat. I remember that night in June, they gave out the award at a big dinner. And when they handed it to me, I thanked them, and then I said to myself, "Thanks, Greg, you got it for yourself. The same way you got to be class president in high school." A sports commentator flew down from St. Louis to do a 30-minute show on Dick Gregory, the greatest athlete ever to hit Southern Illinois University. A St. Louis boy, and would you believe it? He was born on relief. I never got to be as good a runner as Doc Lingo, and the newspapers said I would. Too busy playing around, getting my attitude. I started doing some satire then. I didn't know it was satire. It was just standing on a stage during the all-fraternity variety show and talking to a crowd of white people about school and athletics and the world situation, and how tough it was to run away from home these days unless you came from a family with a second car. For a while, standing on that stage and watching those people laugh with me, I thought it was even better than winning a track meet. But running track was safer. You can be saying the funniest things in the world, but if Whitey is mad at you and has hate, he might not laugh. If you're in good condition and you can run faster than Whitey, he can hate all he wants, and you still come out the better man. My last big thrill in track was qualifying for the National Collegiate Meet for small colleges in Texas. I was rated third in the nation in the half mile for a little while, and I was proud and scared to be able to run with the best boys, white and black, from all over the country. I stood on that field on the opening day of the meet, and it was like the best of all the Thanksgivings and Christmases, listening to the march band play the Star-Spangled Banner, and seeing the flag snap in the wind, and knowing that it was all for me, too. It was like all the war movies I had seen back in St. Louis and in Carbondale, pulling for the American soldiers, cheering for the good guys, feeling a part of something so big and strong and fine. I was beaten in the preliminaries of that meet, but I was proud just to have been there. And then I went back to school, and it was like coming out of that movie, suddenly realizing there weren't any Negro soldiers in that picture. I'm sorry, but you know we're not allowed to serve colored in here. All the joy and inspiration of being an American was gone. When you're a little kid, you can press your nose against a plate glass window and tell yourself you're going to grow up someday and be able to go inside. You can tell yourself You are going to grow up someday and be a man and do all the things a man can do. These are nice dreams for kids, but when you walk down the street and see your track team friends on the other side of that plate glass window, where you can't go, you can't even tell yourself to wait until you grow up. You are already a man, and knowing that there is no dream just strips your manhood away and brings you all the way back down to the gutter. It's a hard thing to be a big athlete on campus and to go downtown and feel like the chump who dropped the ball on homecoming day. To walk down the street and have farmers and little kids wave and call to you like you're a big man, and know in your heart that every one of them is really bigger than you. There was a man in Carbondale, a white man who owned a clothing store, and I used to borrow money at school so I could go in there and buy socks and ties I didn't even need, just so I could walk around that section of town and have some place to go. He was a kind man, and we talked about history and about sports, and he even gave me credit. But he wasn't enough to keep me from wondering about people who didn't break down those segregation laws, who didn't check on teachers who spelled Negro with a small n, who didn't build dorms for the Negro co-eds, so they didn't have to live in Negro rooming houses 2 miles from campus in a town without buses. Sure, the Negro men lived in the dorms, but that was because so many of us were gladiators. We had to be watched. And I wondered how we Negroes were able to sit in the stands and cheer for Southern Illinois to win a football game against a team that had more Negroes than ours did. Of course, every time a Negro got the ball on the other team, we hoped he went for a touchdown. We sat together in the stands because when you're mixed in with the whites, you hear a guy behind you say, "Look at that nigger go!" And then a white tackler dives at the Negro runner and the Negro shakes him loose and goes all the way for the touchdown, and you want to turn around and say, "Go ahead, call him another nigger." But you don't. You hang around and drift around and don't even bother with your student deferment. I was drafted in 1954, and I didn't care much what happened to me in the Army. I'd sleep in my bunk all day. I'd fall out to formation wearing blue suede shoes. I'd salute with my left hand. When I was on KP, I'd crawl into a big pot and go to sleep. And when the mess sergeant started banging on the pot, I'd refuse to come out unless he paid me the minimum hourly wage. A colonel came by one day on inspection and asked me what I was doing in the pot. "We ran out of chipped beef, Sergeant," I said to the colonel, "and I volunteered to be cooked for lunch." The next day, I was brought to the colonel's office. I walked in without saluting and sat down without permission. He just shook his head. "Gregory," he said, leaning across his desk, "you are either a great comedian or a goddamn malingerer. There is an open talent show at the club tonight. You will go down there and you will win it. Otherwise, I will court-martial you. Now get the hell out of here." I won it. I just stood up there and talked about the system and the Army and the post and the officers. I told them how the Army charged me $85 when I lost my rifle. That's why in the Navy the captain always goes down with his ship. And I won the next talent show, and the one after that, and the next thing I knew, I was in special services on an Army tour. I kept running too. On the athletic field, I met Jim Ellis, who became one of my best friends. Jim was a big, handsome lieutenant who had been All-America at Michigan State. He was an all-Army halfback. He used to lend me an extra officer's uniform and let me sleep in the bachelor officer's quarters. We used to tear around Fort Lee together in his car. We balled it up pretty good, and whenever we ran out of money, I'd call Doc Lingle, collect, sometimes in the middle of the night. Somehow, Doc always came through. I started developing little routines now, in between clowning around and playing the bongos and singing a few calypso songs. I worked at a little Negro club in Petersburg, Virginia. I come on stage wearing long white underwear, a big black cowboy hat, and a painted mustache and sideburns. Once I got the audience's attention, I could start talking. Tell them about my home in St. Louis, so cold the snow wouldn't melt on the floor. The bed so crowded, we had to leave bookmarks to save our place when we got up to go into the toilet in the middle of the night. I never really prepared for those shows or for the Army shows. In 1955, I qualified for the All-Army show at Fort Dix, New Jersey. The winners from that show would go on Ed Sullivan's television show. I didn't make it. Probably the best thing that could have happened. I would have been destroyed if I had made the Sullivan show in 1955, knowing nothing about show business, being on there by accident. I would have had the wrong attitude. I probably would never have worked as hard as I did later. But I was disappointed then, and kind of hung up when I got out of the Army in the spring of 1956. No place to go. Nothing much to do. The day I cleared post, I had to fill out a form with my home address on it. I wrote Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, Illinois. It seemed like the only home I had, so I decided then to go back. It was different back at school now. There was a new athletic system, putting more emphasis on football, shoving Doc Lingle off in the corner. I got back on the track team, but I wasn't really interested. Couldn't figure out what I was running for. I stayed through summer school, on into the fall quarter, and my grades were poor. I tell people I was flunking out because it's simpler than explaining that there just wasn't any more reason to stay. Most of my friends were gone, and in the fall we got a collection called, quote, Dimes for Doc, to send the coach to the Olympic Games in Helsinki. Doc left, and I decided I might as well go too. Once I would have been afraid to go out into that white man's world without my diploma, but now I knew that it really didn't matter. I'd been around. I'd seen Negroes who had graduated from white man's colleges with that piece of white paper driving cabs and carrying mail. I'd seen Negroes who got all A's in accounting go downtown to the big department stores only to hear, "Sorry, we're not hiring porters today." That piece of white paper isn't enough unless they graduate you with a white face, too. Then the old monster jumped me again. It wasn't going to let me tuck down my head and crawl out of Carbondale, so I sent myself a telegram. I was laying around my dorm room when the telegram came. Was I cool? Never got a telegram before, but I just lay there as if I got one every day. My roommate got all excited. "Aren't you going to open it, Greg?" "Read it to me, baby." I knew the message by heart. "Come to Baltimore, Maryland immediately. Guarantee $25,000 a year. Start signed, Frank D'Alessandro." Is this a gag, Greg? Nope. I was in the Army with Frank. His daddy's mayor of Baltimore. Said he could get me a job in show business anytime I wanted. Think I should take it? He ran out of that room, waving that telegram, screaming up and down the halls of the dorm. Nobody ever bothered to see that the telegram had been filed at the Carbondale office. They all came in to congratulate me. The whole campus flipped. For 2 days I walked around showing that telegram to everybody who could read, from the president of the university to the guys who cleaned up the stadium. The dean of students read it, and we talked, and he said that maybe I should go. He put his arm around my shoulders, and we looked out his window at where they were breaking ground for the new student union. I had led the campaign for the new union, and now I'd never see it built. Dick, you've been more than a student here. You've been a living part of this school. Southern Illinois University has taken personality from you, and you've taken personality from Southern Illinois. The kids threw me a farewell party, and everyone wished me good luck. I tried to feel ashamed, but I couldn't. I was only lying to them for a little while. I'd make it big somehow, somewhere. Someday that $25,000 telegram would come true. That night, I went down to the Greyhound bus terminal and bought a ticket to Chicago. My brother Presley was working in Chicago at the time, and I figured he could help me get a job. I told the kids who came to see me off that I had me a little girl in Chicago, and I was going to have me a little ball before I took a direct flight to Baltimore and settled down to show business. I waved to them through the bus window, and suddenly the monster drained right out of me, and I felt like I was leaving the whole world behind, leaving everybody who would ever say, "There goes Dick Gregory." I made the bus driver stop, and I got my bag off, and I ran back to campus, crying all the way. Back at the dorms, I saw all those happy faces who believed in me, all those people who wanted to shake my hand again and wish me good luck again. I had to live up to them. They had said their goodbyes. They had sent me off like a champ, and now I had to go. I made up some story about not wanting to ride a bus now that I was almost a star, and I borrowed some money. The kids took me down to the train station. A night train can be the loneliest place in the world, when you look out the window and all you see is darkness moving fast. I showed my telegram to the porter. "You do a good job, son," he said. "They'll all be watching you. Show them what you can do." I tipped him all the money I had left, just for believing in me.